Hey everyone, Savannah here, and today we're sketching a nice little notebook in Procreate. You can grab the free outline layer and color palette on my Patreon, and I'm using my free brush set too, all of which are linked down below. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's go ahead and change that background color, so go click into layers, select that background color layer, and scroll up until you find the notebook color palette. It is under palettes, and we are going to do that dark grayish blue color for the background. Now we are going to do the outline of the pages for this notebook. So create a new layer, bring it below the outline layer, and we're going to end up grabbing this whitish color here to do the pages. We'll add some details here in a little bit. We'll add in some color to these pages towards the end. You can do whatever you want on these pages. You can make it a journal. I went more artistic, of course, because we are doing art. And so I made it an art notebook, but you can make it whatever you want. I am using the square brush for this. You can use a circle brush as well, but we're just going to trace and fill in the shape of these pages with this white color, and then we'll keep moving on to filling in the other shapes as well. And now that this is almost filled, let's go ahead and jump to the other side, the pages on the right. We'll trace that, fill that in, and then again, we'll start adding in some other colors, some details, things like that as we continue. And I do, as you'll see throughout this video and all my videos, from time to time, like to turn the outline layer off. It does help if you are filling in the shapes. Once you have the outline traced and then you want to start filling in shape, it's nice to turn that layer off so that you can see if you filled in everything correctly, if you got the outline the way that you want to do. It's easiest when we go to add in details to make sure that this step is done how you want it before we move on to adding in the details. So that's what I'm kind of doing here. I turn that layer off. I'm just filling in some spots that looked a little bit off to me. And then once I have those spots done, we can go and add in the base of this notebook. So that's what I'm doing here. I added a new layer. I brought it below the page layer. I'm going to do this dark blue color for the notebook. And again, we're just tracing the shape of the notebook. This, because there's such a small sliver, you don't have to fill in as much areas. It's just going to be the areas that you see peeking through underneath these white pages. You can adjust the sizing or the shape of this a little bit. You'll see that I did that along the left side. I want to bring it out just a little bit. Kind of was tucking underneath the pages too much for my liking. So I tweaked that a little bit. But again, if you're happy with the shape, you can move on to the next step. And now that I am happy with the shape, I'm going to do a new layer. We're going to do the notebook rings, the silver rings there in the center. So we're going to grab, I grabbed the darkest greenish blue color here, and I went a little bit more gray. I still want it in the same tones, and so I went gray with that color that I selected in the color picker, and I'm just drawing a line across the rings here. I'm using the Circle Dark brush. The reason I picked Circle Dark is because it's going to pull in more contrast there. It's not going to just be the same color. If you use the circle brush or the square brush, it does change the color slightly, and you might notice that as you're using them. But with the Circle Dark or the Circle Light, it's going to change it more drastically. So it's still the same tone, it's just changing the brightness of it. So it will be a little bit brighter if you're using that lighter or the light brush, and it'll go darker if you use the dark brush. So that's what I did here. And then we're going to add the holes that the rings are going in. So that's what I'm doing with this darker color here. I added this layer below the rings that we did because, again, they're tucking into that. So you want it below it. But we'll add those in and then work on some other areas here. And again, once you have these filled in, you can always turn that outline layer off to see if you need to tweak or touch up anything, which is what I'm doing here. There's a few spots I want to touch up because I thought they were a little bit too small. So I'm going to go through and touch these up. Now I'm happy with how the notebook's looking. Let's go ahead and add some details to the notebook before we move on. So go ahead and alpha lock all of the layers of the notebook that we just created. I'm going to add some lighter color to the top of the rings here, the silver rings, because they are shiny. So I'm grabbing that circle blend brush. I grabbed a lighter gray color, and I'm just at the very top here of each of the rings, adding a little bit of that lighter gray. This brush is pressure sensitive, so the harder you press, the more that pigment's going to pull in. The lighter you press, the more it's going to blend with that original color that's down. So just experiment with it. Go with what you like. I just want to add a little bit of that lighter color to make it look like they are shiny. And I'm going to work on the pages of this notebook because I want it to look like there's more. So I grabbed that grayish color there, made sure I had that circle blend brush on, and then again, make sure you're selected into the white pages there and start adding in these sides here. So you'll see with the outline layer on where the pages are going to be. So I'm just very lightly brushing the side here. If you do it light enough, you can still have some of that white peeking through, and that kind of makes it look like there are multiple pages there. If you press too hard, it's going to just look like a gray blob kind of. So if you did that, that's fine. Just grab that white and then lightly draw over the surface of that gray, and it'll bring that page back in. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. It's just adding in this gray color, just very lightly pressing on the Apple Pencil to make it look like pages on the side here so that there's multiple pages. Because again, like I said, the lighter you press, the more that white's still going to pop through, and it's going to make it look like pages and do a lot of the work for you so you don't have to draw each individual page underneath. And now let's go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to work on the paint pans here at the bottom. And so above the rings, add that new layer. You still want below the outline so you can see what you're drawing. And grab this light gray color. We're going to fill in the color with white first. And then we'll add in the paint colors. Now make sure you switched over to your circle brush. I forgot to do that. I was on my circle blend brush. You could use that, but it's just much easier to use the circle brush for filling in the general shape, and then the circle blend brush is better for adding details to it. So grab that circle brush, start filling in the pans here, and then we will add color and shadows and details to these here in a second. And one thing that you can do instead of tracing every single one, as I did here, is just swipe that layer that you just created to the left, and you can duplicate that layer. And then you just click the pointer, and you can move the layers around, and you can change the direction of them. So that will be the easiest way to duplicate this. But if you want to do it free-handed, or go through each of these and trace them individually, you can definitely do that. Then it won't be a carbon copy shape. It will be a little bit more unique. And so if you want to do that, definitely feel free to. But this is just an easier way to do that. Once you have those all done, make sure you set those layers to alpha lock. I also merge them all together. So you can either merge down each of the layers. If you just click that layer, there's a button on the left that it pops up, it says merge down. Or you can pinch all those layers as long as they're all stacked on top of each other. You can just take your fingers and pinch the top and bottom layer and pinch them together, and it'll merge them all together. I am adding in some shadow, so using that circle blend brush and a darker gray, I'm going to add shadow to the bottoms of these pans, and then we'll do a little bit lighter on the left side, and then we'll also add in color here. And as always, make sure you're turning on that or turning off the outline layer so you can see how it's looking as you're building up these colors. And then I'm just pulling in a slightly lighter gray color for the sides. So the sides are going to have a shadow cast on them because the way that I'm thinking of my light source is hitting the top of these pans. I'm making the shadow darker on the bottom part of them because of I'm thinking light source is on top, kind of up above of the image. So the left side's gonna be a little bit lighter, but the further away the side is, the more it's gonna be dark. So that's why I went a little bit darker there. And now we're just going to fill in these pans with colors. So I'm going to start with the orange here, and I'm just doing a little square on the inside. I'm going to do red, yellow, blue, and green as the main colors. Feel free to use any of the colors that you want to. Just be mindful of if you are doing it as a paint notebook, pull those colors in when you're doing the drawing. I'll show you what I mean at the end. Because you have these paint colors, you want to make sure that those are the same colors that are on the pages when you add in the drawing. So again, that'll make sense more towards the end of this video, but for now, go ahead and just add in these squares of the different color paints that you want to use. Okay, now that I have these paints filled in, I'm going to go through each of these colors and go slightly darker on the color wheel here, at the disc is what they call it in Procreate. And I'm going to use the circle blend brush for this and just add a little bit of shadows here. So again, if that light is coming from the upper middle of the drawing here, it's going to be casting a shadow on the upper part here of the paint because it's, if you think of it's kind of lower down into there, into the paint well, or the paint pan. And so I'm adding that shadow at the top part of this paint pan. And so I'm doing that with all the colors here, just adding a little bit of darkness. At the end or towards the end, I'll add a little bit more of a glossy highlight to it. And I'll show you how I do that here in a little bit. But for now, I'm just adding in the shadows for the paints. And then to make it look like the paints are dropped down into those pans, I'm grabbing that gray color and just going around the edge of the paint that we just added. I did all of this on the same layer. You can definitely do these on different layers and use clipping mask, but I like just doing most of this on one layers for a couple of reasons. One is the canvas size and the settings I use for the canvas. You're limited by how many layers. Now I do have enough layers that I could do these on separate layers, but I just like keeping things confined as much as possible. So I did it all on that same layer. Also, I just like doing that because it feels a little bit more like traditional art where you don't get to have, as many layers, or you don't have any layers for that matter. You're just drawing on top of each other. So that's kind of like how I like to do these because it makes it feel a little bit more traditional, even though this is all digital. Now what I'm doing here is adding in a shadow underneath these pages. So I just grabbed an even darker color of the notebook that we used and just adding in a little bit of shadow right underneath where those pages are. And then I did add a new layer, brought it underneath all of the other layers, and I'm going to do the shadow for the I guess maybe table or whatever this notebook's resting on. I'm going to do a shadow from the entire notebook and these pans that are resting on this table. And so I'm doing that um, darker bluish color, bluish greenish color. I'm using that as the shadow, and then I'll do a Gaussian blur on this just to blur it out a little bit, make it look a little bit more blended out. Sometimes you can just blend it out with the brushes that I provide if you want to. I like using Gaussian. Sometimes I like using the brush to blend it out. So in this case, I just went with the Gaussian because it's a little bit faster and easier to do. But some of my videos, you'll see that I blend it out with the brush a little bit more. And I'm just going through and touching up some of the spots. So I did do a Gaussian blur, but I'm just going through with my blend brush and blending out a little bit. It looked a little too soft for my liking, so I'm just adding just a smidgen of the brush to blend it out here. Now let's go ahead and add a new layer above all these other layers, and we're going to grab that same dark color we just used for the shadow, Make sure you have that circle blend brush and then bring the size down a little bit for this. We're going to work on this. It's going to be a container, a glass container of water that the brushes are sitting in to soak off the paints. And so we're going to go and just very lightly trace the edges. And I'm doing it lightly, still pulling in some of that pigment, but doing it lightly because it gives it that glass look to me. And so I'm just kind of very roughly sketching around the outline here that I provided. I did actually end up bringing it below the notebook layer because I want that notebook to kind of be on top of it, or, in front of it. And so it's going to be hidden, or that bottom part is going to be hidden from that notebook. So I brought that below. And again, I'm just adding in very light sketches here. So right now I made the brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just adding a little bit of that darker blue in here, just to bring out some more of the glass coloring. Once we have this kind of foundation, we can start adding in some more colors. So I'm going to grab a lighter color here because, again, it's glass, so there's going to be some reflective properties. Make sure you turn that brush down so it's about the same size, and pick which side you want that reflection to be. So again, if the light for me is coming from that top middle section, I'm going to have more light hitting from the right side of this than the left. So I'm going to add more light to the right, and don't worry if you go too heavy-handed on the left side. You can always pull in that darker color, that dark bluish green color, to soften it a little bit more. But we're just going to keep building up colors. I'm grabbing this blue. I'll grab in some other colors as well, but we're going to just, again, very lightly sketching in some of these colors here. Don't go too heavy-handed here because, again, you do want this to look like it's glass, and so you still want some of that background color to pull through as well. And I'm just going very slow. I'm just very lightly building up color. So again, you see that I added a little too much white in this bottom left area. So I'm going to grab a kind of grayish blue color and go over it just to soften it a little bit so it's not so bright. Then I'm going back through with that very dark color just to kind of define more of the shadows because it did kind of get muted with all these other colors. So I'm just adding it in certain spots here and there, not too crazy because, again, I want it to look like glass. So I'm not trying to go too heavy handed with the coloring here. I just want it very lightly added. And now I'm going to go through and add more of like a bluish green color and some other colors here to the water. I want it to look a little bit like water, so I'm just adding in some bits here and there and building up this area first, and then I'll add in the paint brushes here in a second. And I'm adding a little bit of white here to make it look like water. It has that reflective property similar to the glass. So I'm just adding bits and pieces here and there. It does look very bright. I'm going to tone it all of this down a little bit more. You'll see here in a second, but I'm just adding some reflective properties to this water. And then I'm going to go through, I'm going to grab that greenish blue color again, and then I'm going to go through with the darker blue again as well on top of all of this. Now I'm happy with how this is looking. I'm going to start adding in the brushes as well. So I'm doing this on a new layer. Usually I do like to do everything on the same layer, but we want this to stand out for the brushes. So I'm grabbing that circle brush, and I'm just grabbing a dark brown color to trace and fill in the shape of these brushes. Now with that, we're going to do the brush on top of the notebook as well. So we're going to add in the details for all these brushes here, and then we'll continue on with adding final details to the actual notebook in a second. And if you're not liking the shape, again, turn that outline layer off and just adjust the shapes here. We'll add a few details to them, so we're going to set them to alpha lock and add more details, but I'm going to add in all the other details here first, or the main colors here first, and then we'll go through and add shadows and highlights to make them really stand out. And I actually ended up putting the brushes on the same layer. So I just moved the brushes that are in the water up above the notebook because we want those to be above the notebook for this brush that's resting on it to stand out. And then I just tapped the upper layer, which is the brush here on the notebook, and then click merge down. Now I'm going to add in, I'm using orange for the brush, and I'll add some brown so it won't look so bright orange. It'll look a little bit more like the bristles. And I also added just this little kind of metal attachment here to the paintbrush as well. So we're just adding in the main colors first, and then we'll go through and add in details here in a second. And again, this is the time before we start doing alpha lock to adjust the layers and make sure they look how you want them to look before we add details. Now we're going to set that layer to alpha lock, and we're going to grab that circle blend brush. While we still have the brown selected, we're just going to add some of the lines here very lightly, adding it in. We want it to be soft. Don't want it to be too heavy-handed with the brown, but just enough that it looks like they are individual bristles. Then we're grabbing a white, adding some shine to this middle section here of the brush. And then I'm actually going to grab red orange for the brush itself just to give it a little bit more dimension. I don't want it to just be one color. I'm going to do that to the other brushes as well, but I did increase the brush size that I used to add in the details. That just kind of helped get that surface a little bit more filled in. I didn't want to do smaller areas like I did with the brush. So that's what I'm doing here, just adding in this reddish orange color here to give more definition to the brushes. And now on that water or the glass jar of water layer, we're going to add the brushes that you would see down in the water because again, the water is not going to be clear. It's not going to be, or it is going to be clear. It's not going to be perfectly clear because it's going to have, paints that you've mixed in there, but it'll be a little bit clear here. And so I'm adding it into the bottom. I used a purple-ish color for it and a slightly more pink color just to add some of the details down below because again the coloring in the water is going to change the actual color of the brushes a little bit, so I changed those down in the water, and I just want to use purple in this pinkish color. Once you are done with that, we're going to move on to adding paint to the paintbrush that's on the notebook and then adding a drawing on the notebook as well. And I ended up picking blue for the paint on the paintbrush. You can pick any color that you want for that paint. You could do red, you could do pink, you could do any of the colors that you want. But again, make sure that when you're adding that color in, you're picking a color that is on the pages. You don't want to have a random color and then not have anything on those pages. Same with, like I mentioned, with the pans. You want to make sure that whatever colors you have there, you are pulling into these pages here as we add those colors in. And to make this look a little bit more three-dimensional, I'm grabbing that same dark blue color that we used in the pan for the shadows and doing it on the paint that's on the brush here. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I did add some highlights as well. So I'm going to grab in lighter colors and add in highlights to all the paint pans and the brush here. Now I went a little bit lighter on that same blue color. That's going to add a little bit of that light shininess, and then I'm going to grab white as well to go over just a few spots, not the entire thing, but just a few spots to make it look shiny. And then I'm going to do that same thing for all the pans here. So I'm going to grab that blue that we just used, add a little bit of light on the bottom left of that paint pan, and then I'll go through and add some white shininess to them all. And I just ended up using the same white for all of these because it's not leaning one tone or the other. So I just use white to just add a little bit of shine to these paint pans. Not much because again, I don't want it to be too shiny, but I did add a little bit. And now here comes the fun part, and I will do a clippy mask for this layer. So above the notebook page layer, make a new layer, make it set to clipping mask, and we're gonna add some art to these pages. Go crazy with this, have fun with this. I did kind of more flowers and plants in this section, but feel free to do anything that you want on these pages. Again, making sure you're kind of pulling in the colors we have down below. But I'm just gonna go sketch in some things here, and then we will add just a very one last little kind of finishing touch before we're done with this drawing. I originally was going to just use a lot of blue on this page, which is why I started with the blue for the leaves, but I didn't like how that was looking. And so I added more of these colors in. So then I was trying to think, how am I going to pull blue in? And I just changed the background of this drawing to blue. So that's what I'm doing here. And then you can add a drawing to the left if you want to. I thought it looked a little empty if I didn't. And so that's what I'll do here. I'll add some more flowers to the left. I kind of went with more of a rose, I guess, on the right side. And then left side, I went more tulips. And because I want to kind of pull in more colors, I end up using orange for the tulips. And for these drawings, I've been using that circle blend brush because I think I want it to look a little bit more like watercolor-esque. And so that's why I use that. You can use the circle brush, you can use any of the brushes. Here, you can even use any of the Procreate brushes that come standard with the application. But I kind of want to have this maybe a little bit of a watercolor vibe going. Now, with these drawings done, there's one last thing I wanted to do to this, and that's just to bring in some light, like there's a light from a window or something reflecting over this notebook. So create a new layer. We're going to bring it above all the other layers, but grab that light grayish color, the top middle in the color palette. Again, bring this layer all the way to the top, and we're going to just use a square brush and add in some light here. So don't worry about it looking weird here. We're going to change the blend mode to make it look like it's light shining through, as you can see in the bottom left. So we're just going over it. Think about where that light, I'm having this light come from the right side, and so on the left here of the notebook where the pages are, there wouldn't be any light hitting it. On the right side, it would be hitting most of this area, so I'm coloring in all of that area. And then the pans, I will go through and erase certain spots where that light wouldn't necessarily be hitting. But we're just going to add in this big blob here first, and then we'll add in the blend mode here in a second. Now to do the blend mode, you just, on that layer that you want to change, you click the N, which is set to normal, and then it gives you all these different options. I ended up using overlay because I like the looks of that the best out of all the others, but there are so many that you can choose from. And then I did a Gaussian blur on this to blur it out a little bit. And now I'm going through with the soft brush here and erasing a little bit of where I think those where the light wouldn't be hitting in these pans. So that's on this side, a little bit on the inside. So I'm just erasing this just a little bit, and then we will be done with our drawing. And I'm doing a little bit on the inside here as well where that light would not be hitting. Now, one thing I did want to change on the shadow layer, so because the pan shadows the same layer as the notebook, I used a selection tool and selected the shadows of the pans, and I just moved them a little bit. I thought they were a little in the wrong spot, so I just moved those a little bit, did more of a Gaussian blur on it because they looked a little too stark. And now with that, our drawing is done. Thanks so much for joining me for this simple and satisfying sketch. Be sure to like, subscribe, and also drop a comment down below letting me know what you design on your notebook pages. I'll see everybody in the next video.